River Varys, aka Tendril, origin explored. Tendril is a supervillain created by Marvel Comics. He first appeared in Spider-Man: The Final Adventure, issue 1 in 1995. In this video, we will delve into the character of Tendril and explore his role in the Marvel Universe. We will also discuss his powers, his relationships with other characters, and his impact on the larger Marvel storytelling universe. Whether you're a longtime Marvel fan or new to the world of comics, we hope you'll enjoy this video and learn more about the fantastic character of Tendril. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. River Varys' tragic origin. For a short while, Peter Parker sought to make a fresh start in a somewhat remote city located on the other end of the country. Fabian Nicieza, Derek Robertson, and Jeff Albrecht's Spider-Man: The Final Adventure tells the riveting story of how Peter wound himself in Portland and lost his powers. This 4-issue series was intended to be a conclusion to Peter's exploits as Spider-Man. It occurred during the famed Clone Saga, during which Ben Reilly briefly assumed the Spider-Man identity from Peter, who at the time thought himself to have been a clone. His partner, Mary Jane, was expecting a baby, so the anticipating couple retired far from the commotion that had become a part of their life, with the renewed conviction that raising a kid was the most crucial task of all. While there, Parker discovered River Varys, a test subject who was deteriorating from a skin ailment. Scientists used the same method that produced Spider-Man to experiment on him. Due to a dangerous and hasty accident, he soon mutated into Tendril, a deadly web-like creature. Varys was a convict with a deadly infection before he was a villain. The comic starts with Peter Parker, who is now working in a lab and does not regret not being Spider-Man since he is now pursuing his actual professional interest, research. It's been 3 weeks since he started working at Garrett Labs in Portland. He worked hard for this position for several reasons, the first of which was to go as far out of New York City as imaginable. The other is that Garrett was the firm in charge of the experiment that mistakenly radiated the arachnid that granted him his spider-like abilities. He wishes to take advantage of this chance to investigate his radioactive blood and learn everything he can about it. As he pursues the various initiatives that the laboratory has been researching, a synthetic skin innovation has piqued his interest. He is intrigued by its applicability for necrotizing fasciitis and questions what they hope to achieve. And that is when Peter's spider sense starts to go off, and he wonders why. That's when he notices Dr. Monica Staphos pleading with Eric Schwinner to reconsider his decision to withdraw treatment on Block 6. Schwinner, on the other hand, informs her that he does not really have much of a choice on the issue. He will not budge on this since her project, called SSD, is not yet ready for use, and she is attempting to force it through the systems, and the other reason is that she is fighting about it in front of the remaining employees. Monica rushes off, frustrated. Monica Staphos refuses to relinquish her synthetic skin research just because Schwinner is worried about the well-being of their research subject, a convict called River Varys, who has a deadly case of flesh-eating illness. River Varys grew up with hippie parents. His mother took her own life when he was 2, and his father had mental difficulties, which caused him to be placed in a series of foster homes. He was eventually convicted of armed robbery, and he developed necrotizing fasciitis, the flesh-eating illness, at some juncture. Calvin Falconer, the chief of security, contacts her at this point. He informs her that Varys is creating trouble, and she walks down to investigate, aware that Eric will be furious if River dies while being in their care. She goes downstairs to check up on him and finds out that he's been on adrenaline overload since being subject to her SSD project. Despite her concerns, she instructs Calvin to inform her if River is in this state even after 2 hours. As she returns upstairs, she dismisses Peter Parker's attempt to greet her. Peter's spider sense starts buzzing again, and he questions why she is triggering it. He decides to investigate her ongoing activities and learns that the files are password protected. He then examines her previous research, discovering that they are all related to necrotizing fasciitis. In one test, the patient died, while in the other, the subject was discharged after being unable to be treated. Peter decides to investigate more and copies the reports. Peter prints off the lab results she discovered on her current subject the day before and matches them to the tests Seward Trainer performed on both Ben Reilly and himself because an aspect of them appeared familiar. A karyotype in the subject's cell structure resembles that of Peter Parker, prompting Peter to conclude that the patient had received received radiation therapy. Peter resolves to track down this patient in the hopes of gaining insight into his personal genetic composition. Peter walks down to Block 6 and strikes up a conversation with the security to discover more about this section of the institution. He persuades the guard that Monica Staphos instructed him to report on the patients. This enables him to obtain a tissue sample from Varys. He learns that Monica's artificial skin variant is meant to build a self-replicating artificial substitute for the tissue destroyed by the sickness, confirming his diagnosis of flesh-eating disease. Upon closer inspection, he discovers that the composition of this artificial skin has been zapped at the same wavelengths as the spider that bestowed his abilities. He chooses to add part of his own blood to the mix, which gives the derivative the necessary capacity to reproduce faster than the infection. Even though this seems to be a possible treatment for River Varys, Peter values his patience and chooses to suspend his experiment for a night to see what unfolds. Monica, in the meantime, digs through Peter's papers and discovers his testing on her artificial skin compound. She takes the untested mixture down to Block 6, seeing that he appears to have perfected the cure, and presses River to take this next treatment. River Varys is transformed into a spider-like monster as a result of the injection. He murders the guards and escapes from his cell using the newfound energy and webbing powers. Monica escapes the scene and finds a phone where she calls Peter Parker in a panic. The call wakes Peter awake, and he learns just enough details about what unfolded before Varys murdered Monica. He abducted innocent civilians and turned the city into his playground. In Portland, a man leaves a pub after a few beers and walks home, reflecting on his night. He is captured along the way by River Varys, who has been changed into the spiderish Tendril as a result of an impure treatment for a flesh-eating disease that was a mix of an artificial skin formula and a piece of Peter Parker's blood. This is Varys' third victim since he fled from Garrett Laboratories. When the newest disappearance appeared on the front pages of the Portland Gazette, Garrett called an emergency meeting. They were able to determine that the serial murderer roaming in the city is really River Varys, the former patient, thanks to the insider information that they had and Falconer's prior knowledge as a S.H.I.E.L.D. agent. Calvin has also discovered a response based on the people he has killed thus far. He advises that they catch and detain River by themselves because the authorities will only want Garrett's help in treating him. This will both stop the attacker and safeguard Garrett from any repercussions. Peter has been tasked with determining what the deceased Monica Staphos did to transform River into Tendril. Now on a mission, Spider-Man wanders the city, discovering for the very first time since his retirement as Spider-Man that he actually feels alive. As everyone looks for Tendril, Spider-Man trails from the steel bridge's shadows, his spider sense humming. The security party finally discovers those captured by the monster wrapped in webbing and yet alive. However, what they believe to be scrap webbing ends up being Tendril's own essence. When the man-monster attempts to attack the guards, Spider-Man intervenes. As Tendril and Spider-Man duel, they tangle out into the open, where the action is filmed by a news team in a helicopter flying over the scene. As the two plummet into the sea below, approaching news teams attempt to contact Falconer and his team, but they refuse to speak on the matter. Tendril escaped by practically sliding through Spider-Man's clutches as they struck the water. River Varys' criminal history reveals that he was detained for aggravated robbery on the same bridge. It is proposed that they identify and locate the guy known as Dry Rot to work backward in order to discover a treatment for Varys. The following day, Peter is hard at work attempting to discover a treatment for Tendril when he inquires with Eric regarding Monica's serum synthesis. Schwinner brings Parker to the top-secret isotope genome accelerator after swearing him in as a secretary. Much to Peter's amazement, it is an even more complicated version of the technology he initially saw being displayed on the day he first gained his spider powers years before today. The Spider-Man needs outside help to defeat this deadly monster. Spider-Man has stayed up all night looking for Tendril, the serial murderer, in hopes of bringing him to justice. The wall crawler is fatigued as the sun rises. Peter knows he is late for a meeting with Calvin Falconer. They were going to see Paul Cantoni, a former subject of the deceased Dr. Monica Staphos, who may hold the secret to treating Tendril's ailment. Tendril makes a trip to his mom's grave, while Peter races to his appointment. He recalls how his mother died of a heroin overdose when he'd been only 2 years old, abandoning him in the hands of his violent drug addict father. He considers what all of this left him with and determines just how little he has left: wrath, hatred, and misery, and that is his to offer to the world. With that, the one who was River Varys goes away to fulfill his destiny. Meanwhile, Peter Parker and Calvin Falconer, Garrett's chief of security and a former S.H.I.E.L.D. agent, arrive at Paul Cantoni's residence. Cantoni, who lives with a horrible skin ailment, begs both men to go off. Although Although knowing why they have to come, he has no intention of assisting them in capturing Tendril. Falconer is about to return to his jeep to retrieve his tranquilizer gun when Peter stops him. Parker pointed out that given what Cantoni has been through, he should have every right to seclusion and the ability to isolate himself from the outer world. Although Calvin believes that the entire trip was a failure, Peter was already determined to pay Paul a visit as Spider-Man later. It's late at night in Portland once Peter Parker arrives as Spider-Man at Paul Cantoni's house. As he swings through the trees, he notices some peculiar brown flakes and pursues them to the source. He is terrified, his spider sense twitching as he sees what Cantoni has become, a monstrosity of dead skin cells. What's even more startling is that he's fighting a grizzly bear. Against his best interests, the wall crawler keeps a safe distance between the bear and Cantoni. Spider-Man begs Paul to assist him in defeating Tendril, but still, the man resists and lashes out. At first, the superhero settles Paul down by pleading with the reality that they were both transformed by accident. He also proposes that his assistant can aid not just Tendril, but also Paul. Paul grows upset once more and strikes. His initial blow knocks Spider-Man into Cantoni's house. He discovers a family portrait there and understands that his family abandoned him after the treatment for his necrotizing fasciitis transformed him into a monstrosity he is now. Spider-Man tells him that a remedy would allow Paul to reclaim his family. Tendril wanders the alleys of Portland looking for a new victim, while Cantoni begins to listen. Back at Garrett, Paul is persuaded to participate in experiments conducted by Eric Schwinner and Peter Parker. They believe they may be able to fix Paul's ailment, but they will have to capture Tendril first. The stakes are even more significant for Peter Parker, who now has discovered that he has necrotizing fasciitis and that the probable treatment would cost him his spider powers. Spider-Man had to step in and stop this deadly villain. Peter Parker goes out as Spider-Man on the hunt for Tendril, a serial killer. He is on the hunt for the killer in order to rid him of his affliction, an artificial skin derivative polluted by his unique DNA. The time is ticking since Peter has necrotizing fasciitis, and treating Tendril would result in a cure for himself too, although at the expense of his spider powers. The wall crawler is gaining in on Tendril with a tracking device. He follows the killer to a room in the Hotel Governor and stops Tendril from claiming his next victims. When the killer escapes, Spider-Man is obliged to stay back and liberate Tendril's victims. Spider-Man once again notices Tendril's signal and pursues him onto the governor's roof. They are joined there by Dryrot, who has come to assist in the capture of Tendril so that he might benefit from the treatment that they will provide. While Tendril and Dryrot are fighting, Spider-Man readies an isotopic genome accelerator he developed at Garrett to deal with Tendril. Spider-Man sneaks up behind Tendril and jolts the villain with the accelerator, but the three of them are trapped in the energy discharge. As he recovers from the explosion, Spider-Man discovers that Dryrot and Tendril have mostly returned to their human figures. Tendril and Dryrot are returned to Garrett for the last experiment, which will potentially heal them of their ailments. Peter Parker and Eric Schwimmer are in charge of the procedure. Tendril attempts to fight the procedure and break loose as they activate the gadget. With the devices overheating, Peter understands that the sole way to finish the process is to include his own DNA. To do this, Peter departs the command center and makes personal contact with the gadget. His body screams in anguish that he hasn't felt ever since the radioactive spider bit him. The inclusion of Parker's DNA wraps up the process of restoring Tendril and Dryrot to human form. Following the procedure, Peter checks himself and discovers that he's been healed of his illness, but that his superpowers were also taken away. In this narrative, Peter's closeness to the isotope genome accelerator led him to momentarily lose his powers. Tendril was also later featured in the Spider-Man Back in Black handbook. This entry disclosed his father's name. How deadly is Tendril? River Varys' body had turned web-like as Tendril, resembling wet cotton, highly tensible yet stretched thin. This allowed him the resilience to physical assaults and the ability to adhere to various surfaces. Much like Spider-Man, he could change the form of his body, allowing him to sprout spider-like appendages from his spine and spray webbing. He had the agility, strength, and endurance of a spider. Tendril could lift half a dozen tons. His stamina was also higher than that of a regular human being. River Varys, also known as Tendril, had been mistaken for Cobweb, the sleepwalker enemy with a comparable web-like appearance, although having no known ties to him. Marvelous verdict. Thank you for joining us for our video about the villain Tendril, also known as River Varys in the Marvel Universe. We have explored Tendril's background, powers, and role in the Marvel Universe. We have gained a deeper understanding of this complex and multifaceted character. It is clear that Tendril is not just a formidable and dangerous villain, but one who is also driven by complex motivations and emotions. While he may have ultimately lost to Spider-Man, he is a very complex and nuanced character who adds depth and richness to the Marvel storytelling world. We hope you have enjoyed learning more about Tendril and will continue to follow his story as it unfolds in the pages of Marvel Comics. And if you like our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks everyone!